Hey, ladies and gentlemen, this is Chris Sost, and I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Chris with the Gig Economy Lounge podcast here, and thank you for tuning in to another episode. Today's episode is going to be about driver or courier safety. It doesn't get talked about a lot, and right now there's a lot of news, rightfully so, about passenger safety, and I know that gig economy contractors and rideshare drivers feel left out. There are very few news reports of driver incidences where the driver gets hurt in comparison to the passenger, and I just believe that that is a product of our news in 2019 and the state of selling news in the modern day era. I do want to start off this conversation with everybody has to do what's in their own best interest and follow all applicable city, state, and federal laws. Above and beyond that, companies' terms of service, that is a very gray area. Now you might be saying, Chris, it's not a gray area, it's written down. It's a gray area, right? So this is the way I perceive it. I live in a state where you can conceal carry as long as you have a permit. And I believe you can even carry in your car without a permit as long as it's 2 steps away. So what I mean by, the toss is a gray area is if you are a concealed weapons permit holder. So you have a handgun. You obviously conceal it. So if you conceal the weapon, the chances of a rider seeing or noticing that you have a weapon is slim to none unless there's a reason for you to display that weapon. I'm trying to pull open my phone while I'm talking here, so if it sounds kind of like, delayed, that's what I'm doing. Everybody wants to harp on Uber and Lyft for not doing enough about driver safety. And hey, if you need to push it, push it. Look, if you looked at the average cab driver over the years, even the perception of the cab driver over the years, one of the most dangerous professions there is. Undoubtedly one of the most dangerous. So people coming into rideshare, if you perceived it as anything other than, a free market version of cab service on your part or transportation providing, there's just a few extra steps to make it a little bit safer. But it's a false perception that you have that rideshare is quote unquote safer than other transportation options where you're a transportation provider. But why companies like Uber and Lyft aren't, so apt to, put riders through background checks? Well, I always thought that was kind of extreme. Or, force them to use, their real name, or put a valid picture of them and quote unquote verify their accounts is because so you have to, from a company's perspective, you have to look at cost benefit, right? So every additional step I put in the way of a rider from onboarding as a rider and using my service, the less riders I will have. So the less revenue I will see. So that doesn't mean that you don't do anything. It just means that you have to monitor the numbers. Now I ran a quick breakdown just to see what the numbers would work out as. So I am going to assume that there were 500,000 incidences last year where drivers were either attacked or didn't feel safe or were attacked or even killed. So I'm looking at a 500,000 incidences. That's a big number. I went pretty big. I could even have went for 1 million. So I just have the numbers pulled up. Uber alone completed 6 billion bookings last year. Add in Lyft, I think they had like 1, maybe 2 billion. So just going off of Uber's numbers, right? Let's just assume Uber's numbers. That is 0.0008%. So 0.0008% of the trips resulted in an incident where there was a driver either uncomfortable or harmed. Think about how minuscule that number is for a second. Now, obviously, any attack, any of those 500,000 obviously is more than anybody would like. But think about from a safety perspective. If you could tell a driver that they are 99.9992% safe, are they going to sign up to drive? Hell yes. I would bet on that number every day of the week and twice on Sunday. As a company, I would hang my hat on that kind of a safety record. It's just when you look at the incidences rather than the actual volume of, what I call the bigger picture, right? So if you look at it and you say, well, there's 500,000 incidences. That's a lot, Chris. Yeah, but perspective, if you look from a higher level, there was 6 billion rides completed last year. And 500,000 of them is a very small percentage of 6 billion. So in reality, statistically speaking, Uber is super safe and Lyft is super safe to drive for. But I do want to go into some safety precautions, right? Because that's really what this podcast is all about. So for all those folks out there that don't feel safe with firearms, there are tons, and I repeat, tons of non-lethal options available to you. Like I said, that I preface this entire conversation with, please check your local, state, and federal laws on these non-lethal options. And if you are considering, getting licensed and registering to own a firearm, I implore you, please go to the range on a regular basis and fire off rounds and practice, please. It's actually a hell of a lot of fun. It can get kind of expensive, I'm not going to lie, but it's actually, you can actually turn it into something where it's enjoyable to go to the range and, fire off a box or two of rounds, and all the while honing in your skills. So that way, if the time comes, heaven forbid, you have to defend yourself, you are at least as well prepared as possible for that instance. Nothing fully prepares you to defend yourself. I'll put that out there with firsthand experience. Nothing will ever prepare you to defend yourself. Honestly, I don't understand how some of the folks in the military were able to do it. Tons more, mentally stronger in that department than me. But there are things that you can do, right? So there's, you can get non-lethal or you can get lethal protection. Some people say pepper spray. I don't know about dropping pepper spray inside of a car personally. Some people talk about tasers and stuff like that. That might not necessarily be legal where you are. And then, what if the taser gets turned around on you? And so go out there and find something that you feel comfortable with. And then number two, this one is number two, and it should honestly be number one on everybody's list. Having a dash cam, and then having subtle signs, like don't have like big signs like, hey, you're on candid camera. It just, that kind of looks tacky, but having a little sign somewhere, and then, obviously the light on the camera is flashing when it's recording. This will go a long way in preventing a lot of the foolishness. Obviously, it doesn't stop everything. Look at the guy that was in New York City or in Brooklyn. That guy was just pissed off, and obviously he did what he did. And get as thorough, detailed in any police reports that you have to, even if you run into a situation that you may, if you just feel uncomfortable, pull over. And just, I say, if you're going to pull over and you're going to ask somebody to get out of the car, I would get out of the car first. Mainly because if anything is going to happen, I would like to be in an open space where I have options. If you confront somebody while sitting in your car and you have your seatbelt on and they're behind you, and anyway, I don't even care if they're behind you and on the passenger side, there's a lot of, you're at a disadvantage in that situation. Whereas if you're outside of the car and there's some sort of confrontation, you can take one of two steps. You can either get away easier, or, you're in a much, better position to deal with the situation as it unfolds. So knowing your surroundings and just understanding your environment will go a long way in your safety, because it'll help you feel confident, right? I've actually had to remove a very violent young lady from my car. Well, she turned violent, and there was a whole lot of ways I could have went about it. I exited the vehicle. I opened up her door. She refused to get out. Luckily, about 800, maybe 1,000 feet, there was a university police officer. I calmly walked over. I told him what was going on. He walked over. He gave her two choices. She could either get out of the car on her own and request another Uber, or he would help her get out of the vehicle, and she would be spending at least a few hours in the county jail's accommodations, which isn't the greatest. She unfortunately chose number two, and she found out the hard way that, yes, they do take you to jail for those kind of things. And I just hope that she learned her lesson, and that never happens again to her. But, there's a lot of things that can be prevented, and then there's a lot of situations that can't be prevented. So that's where, either a concealed weapon or, a non-lethal weapon may be able to buy you time. That's what you're looking to do, is buy you time to get out of harm's way. This job is not, as safe and as easy as everybody would like to paint it. Even though the numbers are great in terms of safety. Think about like the average cab driver, what they have to deal with. Like they're handling cash, infinitely less safe than being an Uber driver. And they don't verify any of their passengers. Zero. Think about convenience store owners, and a lot of them do have bulletproof glass up and all that good stuff, but a lot of them don't. Look at a lot of the banks, right? Most banks don't have, the bulletproof glass go up. These are all very, very dangerous, potentially dangerous and hostile places. They're not until they are. And that's the same thing that goes with Uber and Lyft rides, or delivering for DoorDash or Grubhub or Postmates, or even Amazon. It's safe until it isn't. So as a rideshare driver, as a courier, as a gig economy contractor, my best advice for you is to go out, use Google to your advantage, find information on how best to protect yourself in the most comfortable way possible. Obviously, comfort is the number one thing when it comes to this whole ordeal. If you're comfortable, you'll be infinitely more comfortable in the situation when it arises. Now, obviously, the opposite effect would be if you chose something that you're not comfortable with, and then you actually amplify how uncomfortable you are in the situation when it arises. So if you found any value in today's episode, I'd really appreciate it if you liked, or you subscribed, or you shared. Drop a comment, positive or negative. It could be a thumbs up, could be a thumbs down. That's cool either which way. And thank you guys so much for tuning in to today's episode.